cracks in the Earth's crust widened on the ocean floor, unleashing a steady flow of molten lava that reduced the size of the ocean's basins and caused the sea level to rise. The rifting tore the continent of Laurasia apart, setting North America adrift. As sea levels continued to rise, the interior of North America sank. Gradually, water from the Arctic and the Gulf of Mexico poured in, creating a shallow inland sea, 1,000 miles wide, that inundated a third of the continent.
If we were to look at the environment during the early Cretaceous, 125 to 110 million years ago, we would see a semi-arid savanna. But as the seaway came in, along the margin of it, we developed a very wet, humid climate, very much like the Gulf Coast.
The rise in sea level created a gulf that divided eastern North America from the west. But it also triggered an even more dramatic change, a complete shift in climate. North America woke to a paradise of lush forests and tropical jungles. Global temperatures had risen 5 degrees. In the warm, moist climate of the Cretaceous, plants and animals multiplied in record numbers, and new species began to appear. In the midst of a botanical revolution, the dinosaurs would witness something they'd never seen before. And for the first time in the Earth's history, flowering plants blossomed in North America. In the hothouse of evolution, flowers changed the world. Paleobotanist Kirk Johnson of the Museum of Natural History in Denver, Colorado, is investigating the spread of flowering plants and their impact on the Cretaceous.
Sometime around 125 million years ago, the first flowering plants appear. By 100 million years ago, they're very common in many different places in North America. And by the end of the Cretaceous, by 70 million years ago, flowering plants are the single most common element on the landscapes.
Kirk sees a correlation between the rise of flowers and the fall of the Jurassic giants.
Most of the dinosaur faunas are replaced by smaller-bodied, larger-headed animals, animals with elaborate chewing mechanisms in their jaws.
Among them were the hadrosaurs, commonly known as duckbills because of the shape of their beaks. The largest were over 30 feet long and weighed 3 tons. But what set them apart was a mouthful of 1,000 interlocking teeth.
These animals share some interesting properties of their face and mouth that really have something to say about how they might have fed on plants. These late Cretaceous dinosaurs would grate the vegetation between batteries of teeth. So they had a lot of ways to process plants.
Hadrosaurs were the most abundant dinosaurs in the world during the Cretaceous. In herds of up to 30,000, they trampled the plains of North America, leaving behind a trail of devastation. For dinosaurs traveling in vast herds, identification and communication can be a problem, but not for the hadrosaurs. From a distance, all duckbills looked alike. Closer up, the similarity ended. Some developed an amazing array of headgear. Lambeosaurus had a hatchet-shaped crest on the top of its skull. The crest of Corythosaurus covered its head like a helmet. Crested hadrosaurs ranged in length from 30 to 45 feet and weighed up to 4 tons. Adorned with spines and spikes and humps, these bizarre-looking beasts may not have been the prettiest creatures around, but they certainly stood out in the crowd. The most famous was Parasaurolophus. Its crest was a horn-like tube, 6 feet long, that curved backward from its head. Parasaurolophus has puzzled scientists since it was found in 1920. Some thought its crest was a snorkel for underwater breathing, but its end is sealed, making breathing impossible. Others think there's more to it than meets the eye. At the New Mexico Museum of Natural History in Albuquerque, Tom Williamson has been trying to solve the mystery of what this massive crest was used for.
When Parasaurolophus lived, New Mexico looked very much like this. It was basically a tropical, subtropical jungle. And so we think that these dinosaurs, like Parasaurolophus, might have made sounds to communicate with each other, because these sounds could penetrate through this thick, jungly underbrush. These crests made very different sorts of sounds. They may have made sounds to help coordinate their movements, especially when they couldn't see each other.
To test his theory, Tom needed to look inside the crest without damaging it, so he decided to run it through a CAT scan.
This is the partial skull of a Parasaurolophus, one of these crested duckbill dinosaurs. It's lying on its side. This is the eye socket, and this is the crest extending out from the skull roof back behind the head. And we want to see what the structure, the internal structure of this crest is like, what the labyrinth of tubes, etc., inside of this crest looks like.
The CAT scan produced hundreds of X-rays that, when assembled, created a detailed image of the crest. Inside were 10 hollow chambers connected to the animal's nasal passages, suggesting Parasaurolophus may have used his crest to communicate with other duckbills. To find out, Tom enlisted the aid of computer scientist Carl Diegert of Sandia National Labs. Together, they modeled the crest on a high-performance computer to recreate the sound. The labyrinth of tubes and air cavities resembled those of a French horn. Now, 68 million years later, Parasaurolophus's call of the wild can be heard once again.
The main pitch of his call is quite low. It's at 38 hertz. This is a pure version. So that particular component of the sound roots this whole call. So again, that particular note, that first octave D, is set basically by measuring how long his main sinus passage was.
The longest tube produced the main sound, and the shorter tubes produced higher notes. When resonating at the same time, it was a primeval symphony.
It's quite a startling sound. It's not something that people, at least this century, would build musically. I like to say it sounds almost chaotic.
It's nothing that I've ever heard before, and it sent shivers up my spine. It was just so strange.
The wilds of the late Cretaceous boomed with the song of Parasaurolophus. But another sound in the forest was far more terrifying. After 170 million years of dinosaur evolution, a killer had arrived, unlike any the world had ever seen. "68 million years ago, on the rim of the inland sea in eastern Montana, nothing was safe. By the end of the Cretaceous, nature had finally perfected the most diabolical creature that ever lived. The pinnacle of dinosaur evolution, it was the ultimate big game hunter. During its reign of terror, rivals cowered in the presence of the awesome Tyrannosaurus Rex. T-Rex wasn't the largest dinosaur that ever lived, or the smartest, but it was big, it had keen senses, acute eyesight, and a body to die for. Its strength was in its legs. The bones were unusually massive to support a battery of muscles. Its thighs were as thick as telephone poles, but its legs were lean, designed for running. To offset the weight of its head, its tail was 20 feet long, composed of a half-ton of sinew. Tail and head in perfect balance, T-Rex could outrun an Olympic sprinter. But its most impressive feature was a jaw full of teeth that could bite through a car.
Now look at what I call the Rottweiler effect. The back of the head where the jaw muscles are, it's incredibly wide. The jaw muscles would bulge out like this. And if you were a T-Rex and you flexed your jaws, you can feel these huge humps of contractile tissue going up and down. You could kill, with one bite, any animal in your ecosystem. And then you have the anti-tank gun. Right here, you have teeth. These are not sharp teeth. They're shaped like a projectile to go through armor. These are designed not to cut rotting, putrefied flesh. These are designed to go through the backbone. But up front, something totally different. It's got closely spaced nipping teeth for taking the bits of flesh off a bone or for doing something else. Animals today with close-spaced nippers in the front groom. What was T-Rex grooming? They were grooming each other. That was social bonding.
Back at Fort Peck in eastern Montana, Keith Rigby's excavation is nearing its end for the season. But the fossils keep coming. Once they're out of the ground, the bones are wrapped in bandages, then coated in plaster for safekeeping.
All right.
While it may be years before they're fully examined, Rigby's finds are already adding weight to the exciting theory that Tyrannosaurus rex was a caring parent. His discovery of both predator and prey at Fort Peck is also intriguing scientists.
This particular site is unusual in that it preserves both the predator, T-Rex, and associated carnivorous dinosaurs, but the prey as well. That would include duck-billed dinosaurs or hadrosaurs with the T-Rex. Maybe the carnivores, the predators, would actually remove large pieces of carcass back to a central place and feed the young, or to otherwise save and protect in a much more organized social structure than we give them credit before. Essentially, they went out for take-home pizza or a sack of ribs or something and then brought them home, and we're now finding the leftovers of that meal, or many meals perhaps.
Rigby's views are supported by South Dakota dinosaur hunter Pete Larson of the Black Hills Institute, who also discovered a family of T-Rexes.
We found multiple burials of T-Rex. Sue the T-Rex, the most famous of all of them, which we collected back in 1990, was found with the remains of a smaller male, a juvenile T-Rex with a skull about 18 inches long, and a baby T-Rex whose skull was only about 10 inches in length. It would be a real advantage to act as a family unit. When you have a cooperative family, you can probably do a lot more things. You can feed yourselves. You know, these guys have to eat every day. T-Rex actually probably was monogamous in their relationship with their mate. The females were larger than the males. They formed family groups. The young would stay with the adult.